What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. Today we are talking about Season 3, Episode 22, Explorers. And, folks, it is a very monumentous episode. Are we starting the war with the Dominion? No. Do we have any giant character deaths or huge plot manufactured? No. But we know what it is, Mike. Mike, what time is it?
It's hashtag. Hashtag? I blew that. Really blew it. Hashtag.
Your first word on the show is hashtag.
God damn it.
Nailed it. I think you hashtag nailed that.
It's hashtag goatee go time that CEO Jen has been saying all week, and it's stuck. We love it. Hashtag. So wherever you are, man, lady, or anywhere in between on the spectrum, grow yourself a goatee today, or at least fashion one out of the closest mascara stick you can find.
Yeah,
let's do this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think we look amazing, and yes, both of us independently came up with the idea to use our wives and or ex-wives mascara because our goatees are too silver to be able to really appreciate all of it.
I actually appreciated that they started the episode with Ben coming back from some sort of a trip to show that some time had passed, so for him to grow that full ass goatee.
Yeah, that was clearly fake in this episode and will be real for the rest of it. But these are 100% real, and I thought this might be a good opportunity to do a little time traveling. Mike, are you excited to do some time traveling?
In fact, one could say that we're going to time sail.
My station, I can feel the scents flying away.
Oh, that's right next to I Am Doot, so get ready. That one's sticking around, folks.
Oh, great. We will never make another scent on the show.
No, that's not long enough to decommission
Yes,
us.
it is! Every time we have this... Oh, my... Yes, it is! It 100% is.
That's Christopher Cross. And you know what? We don't need any money. Just to hear... Come on. Take me away to where I always
I'm charging you for this. Every time you do that, out of your wallet, you need to pull out 32 cents, my share in this episode. But here, I want to do some time traveling with you folks because I haven't worn this goatee in quite some time. A goatee quite like this.
Let's see it. Let's see it.
But if we travel back into the way back, and perhaps we can take a look at my very first headshot.
Oh boy!
Here I am. Hold
Nikola
on.
Tesla.
There I am in my very dude. And besides the very obvious creep in the hair, I think I've done okay. Because this headshot is from 22 years ago.
1920.
It is from 22 years ago.
That Keith was like, oh man, these Coke bottle glasses are really going to set me apart. I'm going to...
Yes. I'm going to be a famous... by the time 2023 happens, I'm definitely going to be a famous opera star, right?
Oh, that is...
I mean, I'm going to be successful and famous for sure.
That is special. That is a special screenshot.
Yeah. So you're welcome, Internet. Yeah, those glasses... I'll keep my glasses. I wouldn't mind the hairline because that was coming down a little lower than it does now.
Well, I mean, we don't know what kind of zhuzh you got going up there. It might not have been that much better.
Oh, no, 100%. Hair was down to here back then.
I bet you definitely paid more for those glasses then.
Oh, I definitely did.
Yeah.
No, for sure. So, anyway, grateful to still have hair. Grateful for being desaturated for just a moment. So there we are. We can all commemorate, folks. Are you commemorating hashtag goatee go time? Yeah. Send your photos to
Instagram it up. Instagram it up.
Instagram and tag us in Instagram. Yeah. I think I haven't actually checked our Deep Space Nine Instagram in like 2 years, but whatever.
What is it?
I think it's DS9 Review Show.
Mm-hmm. Or do Star Trek Toys.
DS9
whatever.
Review.
Find something. Tag somebody.
Tag us personally.
Yeah.
Tag us. Anyway, wow, this is going to be weird to look at all day. Anyway, yes, so I'm excited to talk about Explorers. We have not talked about it. I'm fascinated what Mike's thoughts and feelings are about this episode. But before we listen to Mike's thoughts and feelings, we have to listen to yours from last week's fantastic episode. The die is cast. And guys, you rolled some dice and we rolled high. Here are what you had to say. Joshua Cronin gave it a 95. Jason Moe, the lowest of the low, at 86. YouTube viewer at a 95. Delusions at 9 gave it a 90. At noon gave it a 99. JD gives it a 96. Harry Pothead.
Are you gonna sneeze, Keith?
I am. I'm fighting.
I've never seen you fight hard for anything in your life.
Anyway, Harry Pothead gives it a 100. Worf's Boot Shivs with a 94. Kevin Miles comes in with a 97. And Sans Deity with the super tip, who you can join. And I will read your comment if you leave a super tip in the YouTube comments below with your rating in Self-Sealing Stem Bolts of Explorers. Sans Deity gives it a 98.2 and says, this episode is incredible. As I've said many times, Garrick is my favorite on the show, and I had to pick 5 screenshots to demonstrate him as a character. The pained face he makes when he's trying to break Odo would be one of them. This is where we see Garrick in a nutshell. Someone who is capable of terrible acts, but someone who knows he's lost parts of his soul because of them. The interplay between the two of them in the scene is one of the most powerful in all of Star Trek, let alone Deep Space Nine. It establishes Odo's connection with his people, and they to him, which is one of the most important themes of Deep Space Nine. This episode also further demonstrates the cunning skill of the Founders, and how the Alpha Quadrant is not going to be dealing with the usual kind of adversary they're used to. Renee Aubergenois gives us another powerhouse performance there as well, and let's take a moment once again to appreciate the skill of giving us Odo's emotions through those prosthetics. And crazy ones in this episode. Speaking of makeup, what an amazing job they did here on Odo. Kudos. Also, pay your talent, Hollywood. Thank you. Anyway, as Keith would say, this is a 98.2 stem bolt rating for me. One of the truly great episodes of the series. Also, please tell Charlie meow meow. Meow meow, bud. Sans says he's a good kitty. He's been a very bad kitty lately. He's now just taken to sitting on my hands and my keyboard and my mouse, saying I'm not allowed to work. And Keith, you said Al Swearingen and Roland Deschain are good choices. Are you a Dark Tower fan? If so, long days and pleasant nights. Sight. Yes, I'm certainly a Stephen King fan, well into it. We've seen that character in a couple of things. I have not read all the Dark Towers. I read the first one, and I haven't gotten into the rest of them, and I know that I should. I know they're fantastic.
So here you go. You ready for this? Do you know when my brother, before I left on my first national tour, which was with Keith, that whole period of time, Keith, is when I read The Dark Tower. I read it from 1 all the way through, and I've subsequently gone and I've reread one time.
To Bruton, Alabama?
Yeah. It's my favorite. In fact, I have a little secret plan of a Dark Tower tattoo that I'm excited about that will come at some point. Yeah.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
Very, very cool. All right. Did we hear from Chancellor Jen?
Chancellor Jen was gonna wake up and watch. I think she did catch up. She loved it. Go figure. But she has not weighed in officially. Hey, well, hold on, Jen. You don't have to come on camera if you don't want, but we didn't get your episode. We didn't get your thoughts on the last episode, which is the second part of the 2-parter, which I know you've watched.
101, we broke the internet. We broke my scale.
101. All right.
Scale.
She broke the scale. She said, "Okay."
Broke the scale.
That's the official. That's the highest score handed out yet, Jen.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well.
Okay.
There it is. Okay. Well, I hope your goatee picture, you can tag us on Instagram in your goatee picture at Keith Varney. That's Mikey I99. We want to see your goatee pictures. All right. I think it is now time to talk about Explorers, which aired on May 8th, 1995. The top song continued to be, we really wanted everyone to know just exactly how we do it.
Bob like Bob Dylan.
Oh, Bob.
Chips.
What the hell is that?
That is the trailer, one of the worst trailers I've ever seen for French Kiss, Keith.
Yes, the Meg Ryan and Kevin Kline movie that I did not remember existed. And ask me this time next week, I will not remember existed, now. So who knows? Maybe it was great. Mike, what else was great in the world right now that
Keith,
we were maybe watching with our eyeballs?
Yes, so a couple of things. This was a great night on TV because everything was new. We're in May. It's 95. The Nanny, Dave's World, Murphy Brown, Sybil, Chicago Hope, all new. Turning Point, Whiz Kid, which I think was like a news magazine, Turning Point on ABC that they were trying out in primetime. I'm pretty sure.
Sure. They're big on the news magazines then.
Yeah, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. In the House, the movie on NBC was Robin Cook's Virus. But coming back out of retirement once again, we were Columbo was making another return to prime time, so he was running at 9 o'clock. This one was Columbus. Strange Bedfellows. I think it was episode 13 of this season, if I'm not, or they called it season 13 because remember it was like a weekly, then it was Columbo had an incredible run. But I've always been a fan of Columbo, and I was glad to see Peter Falk back. There'll never be another like him.
So the Virus TV movie had to have been a ripoff of Outbreak, which came out that same year and was crazy successful, and an fantastic movie if you haven't seen it. Like Outbreak, so much fun.
So Keith, I wanted to show, if I could, a little bit of this Columbo, but just like a bit of it, because what I thought was funny about it, this scene, let's see if I can capture the screen here for y'all in real time. We might as well do this. We're here. Window capture, okay, that looks good. Can we see that? We can see that.
Yeah, I can see that.
Thanks to the Columbo channel here. But this is not only Columbo's return to TV, Keith, but the first time, years before Breaking Bad, we see Heisenberg. You ready?
Ooh, all right, let's see it.
Went in and made that call.
George Wendt
was on. So he's pulling out this police sketch of the person, the perp. It's Heisenberg.
It totally is Heisenberg.
I guess that's supposed to be George Wendt there, and he's like a gotcha moment, but it looks nothing like him.
That's supposed to be George Wendt.
It's like the gotcha.
He ordered.
And he's got the like I got you nailed face. Doesn't look anything like him.
Columbo, we miss you.
Oh my God, I look more like my headshot from 2001 than that looks like George Wendt. Wow. Okay. Well, let me ask, what was Voyager doing? Well, they were doing the episode Faces, in which we got 2 B'Elanna Torreses, and we also got a full-on face-off face. Pretty terrifying for Voyager. You want to know what else was terrifying? In the weekly world news headlines, Mike, we found a statue of an angel.
No, like this one?
Yes, that one.
Keith, 10-inch iron sculpture proves lunar surface was home to intelligent life?
Apparently. It's only a 10-inch sculpture and they found it?
Yeah, well, we have good telescopes. James Webb Space Telescope.
Apparently. All right. Well, all right. So, mercifully, The Explorers, here we are. It was directed by Cliff Bole, who last directed The Defiant, and is written with a teleplay by Renee Echevarria, who wrote on Improbable Cause, with a story by Hilary J. Bader, who last wrote on Meridian. Which means it's time for something trivial. Now, Keith, waste your time.
2, 3, 4, 1.
Trivia. So originally, this episode was going to be an O'Brien Sisko episode, but the producers wisely said this should be a father-son episode, which I think was an excellent change. This is the first appearance of Lita, which is, maybe we don't realize in this episode, but that's kind of important. So we'll talk more about that.
Who was playing Lita?
Chase Masterton.
Looked very familiar, but that's not who I thought.
Well, she's Lita. That's how you know who it is.
Oh, yeah.
New
You know what they say,
showrunner.
you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make her drink.
Ira Stephen Bear, new showrunner, was happy with the characters in this episode getting drunk, because it established the difference between this show and other Trek, and certainly the original series, they definitely would have gotten drunk, but like the very buttoned up next gen wouldn't have had a scene like that. They certainly do later in Picard, but back in the 80s, 90s next gen, they were way too buttoned up to have a scene like that, and that was a way he was able to plant the flag that we're a little bit different here. In the script, they actually name the ship, and they name it Baraka, which means good fortune in Swahili. And I thought this was fascinating. The concept of a solar sail was first proposed on Earth by Russian scientists. Right. I have to explain what happened there in my hashtag.
You read goatee and said scientists?
No. I was getting ready to try to work my way through the difficult Russian name. And so, it was like one of those, I was like doing the ice skate, getting ready for the triple axel, and then I fell just doing a crossover. That's exactly what happened. The Russian scientist Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, something like that, in 1921. So the Bajorans were apparently using solar sails about 400 years before anyone on Earth thought of the concept. But so far, solar sails have still not actually been used by anyone from Earth, obviously. But it is cool that was a concept way back in 1921. And lastly, Chase Masterton, who plays Lita, originally auditioned for the role of Marda in Jake's girlfriend in that episode. But Avery Brooks, who was directing, said she looked too old to date a 16-year-old. I think she's right. And this was originally planned to be a little one-off, one-episode character. And I think Mike, being the smart guy that he is, might have picked up the subtext that we'll see. We might see Lita again. So there we go.
That cough was it was
pretty concerning. Yeah, seemed like a big problem. You know who probably at this point in the episode is pretty ashamed of doing it. But we're gonna publicly put them up here. It is our patrons, Mike. Why don't you tell us who's patroning the patron, and we'll and what they get.
Well, they get the just pride and joy of knowing that every foible, every flip, every flop that we've done this episode is their fault, and they've paid for it, hook, line, and shilling. Brian, Kimball Beersock, Casey Clark, Jason Moe, Andrew Hayes, Jorge Navoa, and the Mysterious Wharfs Boochivs, Charles Babadge, Richard Coleman, CRM Productions, Nikolay Ivanovich Lobachevsky's Delusions at Noon, Steve Brown, YouTube viewer. Was there somebody new, Keith?
It's going to be there very shortly.
Okay, JD Makes, Colin Deegan, Chris Mitchell / CRM, Pat, Joshua Cronin. Keith, I'm going to come back here while you're working on something. We give these people some AMAs. You get to watch me watching every episode. You get to watch us watch the animated series at times. We do family picnics. We just did Star Trek V. We're going to do Wrath of Khan, I think. Maybe something next could be fun.
Yeah.
Sometimes we play some video games. Sometimes we do. There's all kinds of, you never know what's going to drop. We've got a patron RSS feed, so you don't have to find all of the different podcasts. You can just, get them all in one feed. And we have lively chats and such. But mostly you just get the pride of producing a small channel and helping to, I'd call us businessmen, but that would be just a spit in the face of small businessmen all everywhere.
Truly, I think we might have just created our economy by saying that.
We can do things. Did you change it?
I did.
You did. There he is, Harry Pothead. Welcome to the team. 2 pips for you, sir. That's how fast we can get your name up here. Should you choose to join us, patreon.com/K&M.
That's right. Ooh. We're not fast
Should
at
we start
remembering
over?
to update the. No, we're doing this. I have a hard out at 2.
That's right.
So whatever happens.
And when you're over 40, Keith.
It's hard to out those 2s? Is that what you're saying?
I was going to say, you take a semi-soft out if you need to.
Not what we're doing yet. yes, I can see the comment coming about our nonsense.
Yeah, we deserve it.
Well aware that it is coming in the review of our review of the review. All right, before we get too far into this, we have to introduce our guest stars, which of course are Mark Alaimo as Gul Dukat, Barry Hockwald as Elizabeth Lenz, and Chase Masterson, welcome as Lita. And there she is right there on our screen in our teaser. Bashir is frowning at a pad when an absurdly attractive Dabo lady comes up and brazenly hits on him. She has a sexy little cough, and his dreams are coming true. And he's actually doing pretty well.
Mm-hmm. His game's not bad.
He actually, like, season 3 Bashir handles this so much better than season 1 Bashir. Like, I mean, Mike, why don't you do for me what season 1 Bashir would do in reaction to that?
Is that what you were expecting?
I was expecting majestic glory, and that's exactly what I got. So, thanks for that. Anyway, Dax comes in and interrupts. And he hands her a pad that says "Go away," and it's a pretty solid bit.
Yeah, it's not a bad bit.
I was like, all right, that's funny. Then she says the Lexington is about to arrive, and this immediately freaks Bashir out, and he follows Jadzia for more information about this. And we find out that on that ship is the woman who was valedictorian in his graduating class, leaving him salutatorian, which he helpfully explains to the genius level 7 lifetime Dax as second place.
Mm-hmm.
And to 15-year-old me.
Yeah.
Yes. But, Mike, were you either valedictorian or salutatorian in your high school?
No. What's funny is that all my friends were very smart, the honor society, this society, but and you put different accoutrement on your graduation gown depending on what different stuff you had.
Flair, I think it's called
flair. Yes. So what's funny is when you're walking up to my apartment, we have all kinds of pictures, on the walls and such, and there's one from my graduation with some of my good buddies who I'm still good friends with, and it's so funny because I'm wearing a blue gown. Straight blue.
Flat blue.
Yeah.
You're like a walking green screen.
I'm next to my friends who look like a billboard. They've just got so many awards and dangles and bojangles, right? But it's funny.
That's fair.
But how many of them have a podcast with tens of viewers?
Tens of viewers. Yeah, there you go. That I mean, can't argue with that. Yeah, no, I was not either. Anyway, he clearly dreads meeting up with this lady again. Then we arrive in the Cisco quarters, where a now 7-foot-tall Jake is working on a pad, and which he tries to hide as soon as his father arrives, sporting a hashtag goatee.
Nice.
There it is. Hashtag goatee. Go time. Yeah, it is jarring to see him with the goatee and hair, but it is definitely a welcome. I'm pretty sure this one's fake though.
Yeah,
which was I think so.
It's a little accentuated like ours,
too
but
dark.
But that could be the AI for all we know.
No, because I remember it from before, thinking like that looks really fake. I mean, but honestly, they didn't have any time between filming these things,
right?
So it was literally, you finish on Saturday, you're back on Monday filming the next episode. So they needed to do something.
I like the time. I really appreciate the bit here because that's not even a bit. I like the time they took to establish that it's a change. He says it's a change. There's like meta commentary on it in the episode, and then we roll with it.
Yeah, they acknowledge it. It's great. He has been away growing his goatee at the opening of a library on Bajor, and his attention was drawn by the blueprints of an ancient Bajoran ship that possibly traveled to Cardassia as early as 800 years ago, when humans were still basically in the Middle Ages. And the ship used solar sails that work with light as opposed to wind.
Sailing takes me away.
We also saw that in Strange New World.
We did. Well, and that's the thing, because I told you when we saw it, stick that, pin it to your monitor because we're going to find out a little bit more about solar sails.
What are you doing? Get out of here. It's
It-
Didi.
well-
He's just knocking everything off the desk onto the floor. Why do cats do this?
Because he's annoyed you're podcasting and not playing with him. The same
Oh,
reason
get
Charlie does it to
down.
me.
But then he goes. He's like, take that, you need that, it's gone. Peace.
Uh-huh. Yep. That's exactly what drove me. Last night I was composing, and so I've got my computer hooked up to my keyboard. So I'm like, putting stuff into Sibelius, and he knows that I'm using it, so he goes and sits on the keyboard and composes his own stuff, which is notated onto my score. So annoying. Anyway, we love you guys.
Yeah.
We love you so much. Anyway, so yeah, you saw on Strange New Worlds an Easter egg to this episode,
That's cool.
and now you get it. So super, super cool. It even looked very similar because it was a cool Easter eggs. Anyway, so Jake wonders, could that even fly? Is that even space worthy? And Cisco says, I'm gonna build one. And
Quickly.
he's gonna build one. Why the hell not, right?
He is
There's
a
nothing
tinker.
else.
They have established he does love to tinker. He put that puzzle clock together.
He sure did. Yeah, I mean, he likes to build stuff, and like old timey steampunk stuff.
Mm-hmm. So it
Which,
tracks.
Totally tracks. So in Act 1, Cisco excitedly tells Kira and O'Brien that he's got lumber coming from Bajor, and he wants old-timey tools like a saber saw to cut it with. He doesn't want to use a laser scalpel. He's going to make it just as the ancient Bajorans did. O'Brien is skeptical that the ship is spaceworthy and very much doubts that it ever got to Cardassia. And the ship is small and brittle, and at sublight speeds, it would take years for them to get there. Kira is annoyed that he doubts the Bajoran legend. But he points out that he had to store oxygen and could have only had a few weeks on board, etc. And she says, you sound like a Cardassian, because he doesn't believe that the Bajorans were ever more advanced than they were. And you can clearly see that there's a lot of political machinations here with the legend of this ship, which we will play forward, which I love. It's not a huge part of this episode, but a little bit of a layer there about, who writes the history and so forth. That I totally get it. And it's a nice little, it's a nice little threaded in idea of the larger world.
Yes.
That's happening right
Which they
here.
pay off at the end, so I think that's
They
even
totally
cooler.
pay it off, which is I think it's really well crafted, really well written. Anyway, Cisco doesn't care. He just wants to do it because it's fun. Great. I love the element of. This is another thing. Like Picard really struggled with fun, but Cisco really does have a sense of whimsy and has a sense of fun. He just wants to do it,
Yep.
and I like that for the character.
Oh, 100%. And I love. Fun is a great way to put it, but when he geeks out about something, there are certain things he doesn't have to be pragmatic about. It's just, I want to do it. It's fun, and he deserves it, man. He gets to blow some steam a little bit.
Yeah, and he has a sense of play, which I think is very healthy, and a great example for Jake.
Yeah, and he never obsesses about it too much, and he wants to have that time with Jake. It's awesome.
It's an opportunity to build a rocket ship with your son, and a literal one in this case. Pretty cool. We see a montage of him slowly building the ship by hand, and he even knows how to weld. Have you ever welded, Mike?
I have not ever welded.
It's fun.
No.
Later, he tries to talk Jake into going on the 4 or 5 day trip with him. He wants to do the hardest part of the journey to Cardassia just to prove that it's possible. And Jake wants to go, but he's got a girl coming, and it's tough. Ben's disappointment is palpable, and Jake clocks it. Later, Dax comes in with a sack lunch and marvels at the level of detail that Cisco is going to. The only real difference between this ship and the Bajorans' actual ship is the gravity net, because zero gravity makes Cisco and the Deep Space Nine accountants queasy. Dax can tell how excited he is. It's been a long time since Dax has seen Cisco like that, since he built Jake's room as a little boy with a cool starfield. Again, just really good character beats here.
Mm-hmm.
And like I can totally see Cisco with his little boy coming home from the hospital and like totally geeking out and making a cool bedroom.
Yeah, and this, you know, I haven't had a lot of time to think through this episode because I just watched it, and I think I have a a bias about it because this story, all the father-son stuff really strikes me deep. And
Of course.
I remember being 16 and having a moment very similarly where, you know, my dad and I would always watch, we had Saturday nights was kind of our night. And I remember when I started getting old enough that I started getting social plans on Saturday nights and having to start weighing those,
Yeah.
the decision to sacrifice that time. And obviously you're not benefited of foreknowledge of knowing how brief that time is and how there is a finite number of Saturday nights. But even at 16, 17, when you're at the height of, you know, horny and the height of the importance of social acceptance,
Right.
I remember the emotional weight of wrestling with that. And, you know, even looking back, it affects me. But I know in that moment I felt it. So what I really loved, and you don't see on TV too often, is we get the beat of, parent losing their child or child dumbly sacrificing that time. But here Jake has the emotional quotient of wrestling with it. And I love that bit. I think it's important for the dynamic. And it's cool to see Avery Brooks really get excited in these episodes. You can tell he's firing 100% because, as we read in the companion, we've mentioned on the show, he was really set on portraying a wholesome, three-dimensional, healthy father-son relationship, especially as people of color. And I think it's just wonderful to watch.
Yeah, I 100% agree, and we'll talk more about it later. But I love it. I think it's really, really terrific work. Dax can also tell that Cisco's heartbroken that Jake isn't coming along, but he understands that Jake is growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I think it speaks really well of Ben too, because like yes, I'm heartbroken, but I'm not going to force my child to to like not take the steps of growing up just so that I can be more comfortable. And he's
lesser episode would have made his whole motivation for doing this trip to bond with Jake, like that camping trip episode they did it, but here it wasn't that. That was part of it.
You're coming with me whether you want to or not.
But
and
this, it's also he just was geeking out. He's like, I want to build that ship.
It's really good writing. Renee Echeverria and Ira Stephen Bear are terrific writers, and I think handled this really, really well. Dax, of course, can empathize, having been a father a few times herself. Nice little beat there, but like, of course.
Yep.
Dax has gone through this exact transition multiple times. Later, Jake gets a message from New Zealand. We all think it might be from his girlfriend, but it's not that. And then he looks out the port and winces. Clearly, he's thinking something about his dad. And at this point in the episode, we think it's, because my girlfriend's coming, and he realizes that he wants to be with his dad, but it's clearly more
Or
than
for
that.
all we know, my initial thought was, she just canceled on him.
Oh, well, but he was excited when he read the message.
Right.
Then looked out the port and winced. Good direction there. He then goes to Cisco's now finished ship and tells his father...
He built that shit fast.
Well, we don't know how long the montage.
Yeah, there was a
right?
montage, yeah.
There's a montage. Montage can be anywhere between like 10 minutes
now,
and 10
if he had
minutes.
had a beard at this juncture, we'd
like
have known.
A full, yeah. That would have been great. Like we see like the entire Dominion War happen around him. He's like, whatever. But here's the exciting part. He says, I want to come along, Dad. And I wrote down kind of what you just said. Jake is a remarkably emotionally intelligent teenager. And that's what good parenting will do. So it's really speaks to the quality of Jake, but also that's Ben's parenting to create a kid who is that emotionally intelligent. It's pretty cool.
An interesting direction in this scene too, because they choose not to have Ben react in any sort of like surprise or I'm so thrilled. It's sort of either it could have been, we don't know. It could have either been, oh cool, that's great, but I was going one way or the other. I'm excited about the mission, so that's like cool. Or it's just subtle. He's playing it inside. He doesn't want to show,
I think it's because he doesn't want to put too much pressure on Jake.
It's really cool.
Because like if he's like, oh God, it was everything I've ever wanted, that then pressures him to do it in the future.
Spoiler alert. And this goes to the writing, goes to the performance, goes to everything. At every corner in this storyline, when I thought, oh, here comes a trite beat, right? Because there's so many pitfalls where this could just be trite. They swerve every time. Here was one of them. It was like, oh, he's gonna be like, oh, I'm so excited. Nope. They it's so grounded and so how it should be. It's hard not to just applaud.
Well, I think it speaks to the emotional intelligence of both characters, right? They are doing a much better job nuancing their reactions for each other's benefit.
Yeah, and also natural chemistry.
Yeah. Well, clearly they were very close, and Avery talked a lot about the responsibility he felt taking care of Sarek. Like, and that I think it's great. It's just good work. Anyway, so later, Dax creeps up on Bashir, who is cramming for his meeting with Dr. Lenz, who was the doctor who beat him. They were super competitive with each other in college, and she got the prime post on the Lexington, which is what everybody wanted, but he wanted to be on Deep Space Nine. Dax asks, so then why does it matter? And he points out that if she had wanted Deep Space Nine, she could have taken it from him. And it's all about control, and which is interesting. And Dax has a thought in that moment and doesn't share it. And I don't think we ever hear what Dax's thought was, but there was clearly one there.
I thought that it was very interesting that for me, this episode, this storyline, retroactively informed the storyline I disliked greatly some episodes back when he was up for that prize, and it was sort of that weird competitive thing. Everybody was competitive for him, and he was pretending like he wasn't into it. This informs that quite a bit. It's just kind of flip-flopped.
Yeah. No, it's interesting.
He does have that pressure he imposes on himself, and he wants to have been done better, and that Easter egg of the ganglionic fiber or whatever really drops its head again.
Well, and there are more layers to come yet.
Okay.
Amazingly, there are still more layers to come on that story, which is so weird, but here we are. So later, none other than Gul Dukat zooms Sisko, already aware that he's going to make part of the journey in the lightship. He taunts Sisko about chasing fairy tales and reminds him that lightships are very fragile and it's super dangerous. There's all sorts of things out there. There's the Maquis, there's subspace problems. And Sisko directly asks him, are you threatening me? And he's like, oh, no, of course. But the Cardassians clearly don't want the Bajoran fairy tale to be true for lots of political and social reasons.
Shout out to the costuming here. All Ben's casual clothing is awesome.
Yeah, I mean, well, Garrick's been busy. Yeah. He's been back. He's got to be a tailor again.
Which stands to reason. Maybe Garrick's got some information about Ben's trip and passed it along.
Well, but would Garrick tell Dukat that? They hate each other.
Who knows? Or they just have manifests of all kinds of ancient Bajoran tech getting sent over to Deep Space Nine.
Well, I mean, the Cardassians have always had good intelligence, although now we're dealing with the Cardassian government and not the Obsidian Order because they got their butts handed to them. So, interesting. Anyway, they set sail from Deep Space Nine, and Ben and Jake manually crank open the sails. The ship is... No. I have to go over and delete your buttons. You caused
the collection
trouble.
of buttons I have are just random.
It's terrible. Every one of them costs money.
So we haven't pointed out yet, though. I think the redress of this little area is awesome. I love the sort of very tactile, very practical set, very props, lots of maneuvering, and clearly there was somebody had some history with sailing because the terminology and the movements. I think it's grounded. It's based on something.
Yeah, I literally, my next sentence was the interior design is awesome. Looks like a steampunk sailboat cabin.
Yeah, 100%.
And the outside of the ship is beautiful, and the CG actually looks pretty decent considering
It's modeled on the same textures as Odo when he's gooing, but same difference.
it's just like I'm a sail now.
That would be funny if it was you saw his face and he was like, "I'm helping out."
I'm the king of the world. Yeah, great. The sound design of the creaking ship is also terrific.
I'll save it here, but I did a whole riff on this in my watch along because the hum is so iconic on the show.
Yeah.
You're listening to it now. So when it's not there, it sneaks up on you and you're like, hey, something's different. And before Ben mentions it, and they even put the kind of swaying creak, if you listen to like a ship sound effect, you get that very sea-based
Yeah, no, and as somebody who has sailed a fair amount, like it feels very realistic. It feels, that the interior of the cabin there does feel like, being below deck on a sailboat. Like it has all of that feel, and that's the sound, that's design, that's the acting, that's the writing. Just great stuff. And Jake finally gets it. He gets how awesome this is. And I also gonna say the score.
Excellent score.
Terrific.
I mentioned that too. Yeah.
It's a different type of score than we've heard. It's a different theme, and it's beautiful.
It's very sea adventure. There's like a staccato nature to it that I appreciate. It's really cool.
The Voyage of the Mimi? Did you remember that?
In school, man, that was my jam.
or whatever.
Mrs. Cavalieri, 7th grade science.
Definitely watch the Voyage of the Mimi. Ben Affleck's first role.
I gotta imagine it's on YouTube, right? Gotta imagine.
Oh, it definitely is. Yeah, I love that score too. The theme for the Voyage of the Mimi. Anyway, so in Act 3, they're on the journey, and Cisco is navigating using an old-timey compass rather than the computer, which I totally get, and I think that's really cool. Later, if I have any wormhole, it's like he had to have a computer navigation backup somewhere. Like, let's not be crazy, but maybe he didn't. It's very bold of him not to do that. So later, Jake asks about the space crabber, a rare moment on Trek that we acknowledge that people still poop in the future. And Jake is bummed to discover. You're gonna pull up the Voyage of the Mimi.
I got it. Yeah, you want to hear it? Because I don't remember it. So let's see what we got.
Let's listen.
Is this Chrome?
Maybe.
No, I need Chrome, baby. There
This
we
is
go. Tintillating radio.
Yeah. People of a certain age, this definitely taps into your childhood.
I love this thing. Episode 2, Setting Sail. That was like my first experience of when an episode would end and like class was over and you knew you had to wait until the next week till we were going to watch the next one. Oh, because we only did it on Thursdays we would watch. And just that feeling of, I can't wait. I cannot wait until the next episode.
And then like when the storm happened.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Man, I got to watch it
so
again.
good.
I have no recollection of what the plot was.
No, but I remember because they get sort of shipwrecked and they teach us survival skills and how to use condensation of water to get yourself water.
Oh, that's an earworm.
Oh man, so good. All right. Anyway, if you didn't watch that in class, you're going to be so bored by this. But if you did,
go and watch it. If you haven't watched it, go check it out. Yeah,
I bet a lot of you watched that. All right. Jake is bummed to discover that all his father brought to drink are zero-gravity rations. And perhaps this explains why he doesn't have the backup navigation. Cisco is all about authenticity on the trip. And actually, you know what? I can sort of fix that because he did have a plan. He can call the station and they can be there within an hour.
Mm-hmm. So for a moment, I thought that the whole we're lost or whatever was a ruse for him. Like he was just spending extra time with Jake.
Yeah, well, I don't know.
I love this screenshot. Like this would be a poster for me. It's such a good moment for them.
Oh my God. Good, like father-son stuff and that design. Yeah, 100%.
And that porthole is excellent.
Porthole's excellent. No, I mean like the father-son of this all, like you said, and I didn't go through the experience that you did, but like Oh God, it really does like tap into it's like that
Yeah.
core.
And if it's not
Really.
something you had, because we didn't have a great, like it wasn't perfect, you know, it harkens to something you wanted, or that, you know, it's it's something we can all connect to because you either had it and miss it, or you didn't have it,
Wish you
wanted
had
it.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really good stuff. Good stuff. Anyway, so they have a quiet moment where Cisco notices, like you said, the silence of no engines running. He imagines how the ancient Bajorans must have felt, not knowing where they were going, and to find themselves here on this ship.
Yeah, the parallel I draw is sort of people in the South Pacific, you know, creating those first rafts, those sail rafts, and traveling hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles, or ending up on Easter Island and finding these places, and then somehow being able to navigate back from the stars and from the tides, and just the bravery.
Well, that's the parallel here.
Yeah, the bravery that must have taken.
It's you know, there are already people there, but finding North America, whether it was the Vikings, whether it was whatever, it's and just like, I'm just gonna sail in that direction, see what happens.
Man, even
might fall off the world.
When I do these cruise ships, I like to go up on the deck at night and just stand there and look at the black ocean and just feel that utter guttural fear of just how the immensity of it.
Terrifying.
And that's on a giant ship that I'm pretty confident is going to make it to where we're going. I can't imagine being on this little thing and just like hoping for the best.
Flimsy ship.
Yeah.
Out in the middle of it's crazy. So anyway, so he thanks Jake for coming, even though he knows he didn't necessarily want to, and which I thought was, if you're a father, clock these things. Thank your kids for stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's really just bearing witness to Jake's decision. There is such a good like father moment.
Well, I think so many parents like to continue the ruse that they've got everything handled and they're in charge and nothing affects them, and I think that's they think they have to portray that character, but showing a little bit of vulnerability, man, that would have been great.
Oh my God, right? Show vulnerability to your kids, folks. Anyway, we're not dealing with our own shit.
Or they'll grow up and not want any.
Oh, yeah. If they're gonna grow up and start a podcast.
Talk about this shit.
You don't want this. You do not want your kids ending up like this. Anyway, Jake says, I have something I want to tell you. And he gives his father a pad with a story he's written. Read it first. And Cisco says, I'll read it right friggin' now. That's what the artist really wants. On the station, the Lexington has arrived, and Bashir is nervously getting his infirmary ready for his rival to show up. Odo comes in and teases him and says, she's in Quark's. So they go right there, and Bashir and O'Brien sit in Quark's, too nervous to go talk to her. And Quark mentions, she's beautiful. Then she gets up and blows right by Bashir, ignoring him entirely. Oh, snap. We go to the solar ship, and Jake is nervously watching his father read his story. I know that feeling intimately. I get it. And Cisco finishes and gives his review. It's kind of lukewarm. And he says he likes it, but he has notes. Jake is clearly disappointed. And Ben mentions that, you're writing about things you haven't experienced. Unless you've, joined the Maquis.
And bang.
Jake, quick on his feet, pretends he has for a second. Which I thought was really good.
Good moment, yeah.
I think it's really interesting. It's very interesting to take that Ben is not effusive here. Mm-hmm. Especially in contrast to like the 80s, 90s parenting style of overpraising your kids.
Or the opposite.
Or right, and that he gives a very sort of like honest take on it. And he says, there is a lot of promise here, and he does strongly encourage Jake to keep writing. Mm-hmm. But he's like, it needs, you need some seasoning, needs some work. And I think, it's so funny. I think about it. That would have broken my heart had he done it that way. But
it's interesting too because it's a preebie. Yes, it's a very interesting choice that we should talk about for a minute because it's a preebie. Had Jake already expressed his interest to go to this school, Then
Yeah.
there's so many potential motivations for the lukewarm review, or for the I should say
Right.
the critical
Sure.
review, because it could be that he doesn't want him to go, and so he's discouraging him. It could be that he
Right.
knows that it's a possible profession, so he wants to be very captain-esque, or commander-esque, where he's he's adjudicating just like he did with Nog, and he's like, I want to make sure that he has the goods before I recommend or before I approve. But here it's very just dad, and because the beat preceding this, Jake seemed very trepidatious in a way of
Nervous
making his
about it.
dad reading it. So Ben makes a conscious choice to be so, I don't want to say brutal. It's not brutal, but it's very honest.
It's honest. It's honest. And, God, I mean, giving writers and artists feedback is so treacherous because, for myself, there are times I need your honest feelings on this. I need some honest feedback. But there are also plenty of times, especially when somebody's first looking at something, I just need some validation here. I need some.
It's curious because I'm tempted to say that it's a bit of writers preempting where they want to go with the plot line. However, everything else in this exchange or in this relationship during this episode is so well thought through and plotted that it's hard to think that they would have kind of just anticipated a forward beat. It's tough.
I think we're saying something about Cisco.
Mm-hmm.
I think we are I think from his point of view, and I'm not necessarily thinking I don't think I would necessarily do it this way myself, but I think from Cisco's point of view, he is treating Jake with enough respect to just be completely honest with him. And to be like, all right, yes, this does show promise, but there's some pieces here that you can get better at, as opposed to sort of coddling him or pandering to him. I think he's being straight with him, and I think that if it were me, I would have softened the edges a little bit. But I think that was what he was trying to convey about the character. And Jake does not take it.
Nope.
He does not take it badly. And he follows it up with what Jake really needs to hear. And that is, I strongly encourage you to keep writing. Jake says, I want to. I've been offered a writing fellowship at the Pennington School in New Zealand, on Earth. And Cisco is happy for him and says, yeah, go friggin' do that.
Which shows a lot of growth, because once, he responded a little bit more bristly when he heard Jake didn't want to go to Starfleet. But now he's
coming to accept who Jake really is. We also learned a little nugget here that Mrs. O'Brien was the one who submitted him to Pennington, which is interesting. But then something goes wrong with the ship. We don't know what it is. But we come back after the commercial break and discover that one of the masts on the ship has collapsed and they're in trouble. They're going to have to jettison the broken sail, which they do. Good thing you had that little eject button. They're safe, but they're not going to be able to fly very fast this way. Cisco is about to give up, but Jake says, nah, man, the Bajorans didn't give up. Let's keep going. So they do. Good on Jake there. So back on Deep Space Nine, O'Brien and Bashir are heroically drunk, singing ancient songs that are out of copyright. Bashir is gutted that his rival ignored him. And O'Brien thinks she's got to be in love with you or can't stand you. And he explains that Bashir is not an in-between guy. People either love him or hate him. And he admits that he hated him when they first met. And now, well, he doesn't hate him. The love is honest right there. And I identify with that very well because, I think in a lot of ways, I'm a love him or hate him guy.
Oh, yeah, I know.
That people either really like me or they can't stand me. So
I fall into that same category, which is probably why we're friends.
Yeah, well, fair enough. Meanwhile, Colum plays an amazing drunk.
I was going to say, there are two very different ability levels in performing drunk here. That's how I'll say it.
Drunk.
Yeah.
Yes. Colum is a very authentic drunk. He even does some of his lines with his mouth full. Hilarious.
Bashir's going a different way, but it's cool.
Well, I mean,
It's comedic beat, whatever.
it's possible he's never been drunk.
Yeah.
Colm
Yeah, he's been
clearly been there. If you know, you know. So he says, all you gotta do is confront her. But maybe wait until tomorrow because you can barely stand up. And all I'm thinking throughout this entire scene, now that I'm at my age, I'm like, I hope they have good hangover cures in the future because I am dreading their morning. I'm like, I'm already sad for them.
Oh yeah, they must. There's got to be something they spray in their face or something.
That's right. They have warp drive. They've got to have a way to fix that. So on the ship, they get the sails working together and they hang the hammocks. And Cisco gloriously, thank you so much, says hammock time.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
They
you
do a
for doing
full.
this.
Yep. And then it's funny. They do a full '90s beat because Cisco goes hammock time and Jake goes yo, like they do a full like hip hop moment, and I'm here for it.
I was so here for it. Yeah. Thank you so much. I wonder if that was in the script or whether that was an Avery choice. Whatever it was, I'm like, thank you for that. I was going to do it, and you did it for me.
Yeah. They're like, anachronistic? Forget it. We're doing it.
No, it's subtle. It's subtle. Because if you weren't a child of the 90s, you would have no idea what that meant.
Yeah, it's fair.
That was an ephemeral moment of glory in our childhoods. So they continue talking about the Pennington. And Jake says, I'm not going. I'm not ready yet, and I can defer for a year if I want to. Jake says, Cisco says, I wasn't much older than you when I went to Starfleet. And he tells a story, again, showing vulnerability.
An incredible story.
Great story about how homesick he was at the beginning. And he would beam home every single night for the first week. But then he got over it and didn't want to leave. And actually, it's a great, in that beat is a little nugget there that I think speaks to why Cisco is such a good parent, because his parents were so good. Because he said, like, my parents, I just arrived home for dinner, like nothing was strange, and my parents didn't even call attention to it. They just let me work through my stuff.
Imagine college if you could have just beamed your laundry home.
Oh my God, yeah. Wouldn't be my cell phone, but my laundry for damn sure. Actually, no, it's not true. Freshman year, I struggled. I really struggled my first year in college. So I probably would have done the same. So then Jake says, it's not me I'm worried about. I'm not worried about being homesick. I'm worried about you. You're going to be all alone here on the station without me. And Jake wishes that Cisco had somebody, like a girlfriend. It's been over a year since you've had a date, and I just so happen to know someone who wants to meet you. Talk about, like the emotional intelligence and empathy that Jake has. Like, they're both thinking about each other's situation in this. Jake's concerned for his father. It seems genuine, and it's great. Then something else goes wrong, and they're being thrown through space at what looks to be warp speed.
We can tell by the little rainbow lasers.
Well, the stars. Once the stars are going by super fast, we're at warp. Turns out they are at warp, even with the broken sails and main power off. They eventually slow to a stop, and they realize they got themselves caught in a tachyon eddy. And because of the sails, they were pushed to warp, because the tachyons go at warp speed and don't usually affect anything because they're not taking up as much space, but the sails had them have. It doesn't make a heck of a lot of space of sense, but the first pass works, so like I'm fine with it.
Cool.
And they may have traveled light years and have no idea where they are because Cisco's compass is smashed. And he's super bummed that he's gonna have to call for help. But the station is not responding. So we go to Quark's, and now sober Bashir stares at his rival, then musters up his courage to go sit down with her. He is forced to introduce himself to her because she doesn't recognize him at all. She knows his name, though, and she thought he was an Andorian, one of the blue guys. She got him mixed up with something else, and it turns out she's cool after all, and knows all about the pre-ganglionic fiber issue. And here's one of those great what if conversations. Turns out she's bored on the Lexington. It's just a charting mission. She's envious of him.
What they didn't know they were doing, which I think is so awesome in this beat, because it's like, yeah, the grass isn't always greener, right? Yeah, it's a pretty obvious kind of beat, but this is pre-social media. It presupposes what social media will be, which is you look on social media and everybody's living the life. Oh, I wish I had their life. I wish I had that. But then if you go actually talk to any people, they're bored. They don't love what's going on. They're trying to portray an image.
Everybody's got their stuff, yeah.
Of being happy so that they don't have to tell anybody they ain't happy. So it's so great how this captures something or a connection we think, oh, it's great. Instead of we don't see our schoolmate for 20 years and then find this out. Oh, we keep up with them on Facebook. I know everything that's going on in your life, but guess what? That's all.
No, you don't.
It's all manufactured. So I love that this happens before all that, but it's the same thing.
Yeah, it's a good and because because they weren't Facebook friends, she didn't even know what he looks like.
Which makes sense because she was back there freaking out about her speech, just like he was. Yeah.
Of course. And turns out they're fast friends, and they just want to go talk about science. It's pretty cool. So we go back to the solar ship, and Jake asks if, are we going to run out of air and die? And Cisco shrugs and asks about this woman Jake wants him to meet. Turns out she's a freighter captain named Cassidy Yates. And he makes a deal. All right, if you go and meet with this freighter captain, I promise not to make my decision about whether to go to Pennington on how the date goes. Which seems really fair. That makes sense. But Jake says, you know what? I've already decided to wait a year so I can get more life experience before I go, which was the number one critique that Ben had of his writing. He didn't have a lot of life experience. And I totally get it. And I think that there's the weird thing is it's really good feedback. And because I remember my writing from when I was his age, I was like doing all this crazy stuff that I had no idea what I was talking about. I was just sort of mimicking other things.
Well, yeah, this could have gone a lot of ways, right? But I think that once again, this is great writing. We see the emotional acuity of Jake Sisko, and we also see just a great human being here, right? Instead of like getting hurt about all those things, he's like, let me make my decision based on what's best for my writing, because that's a true passion. I trust my dad enough to take his critique, and I can square my decision logistically, postpone a year, get that life experience, utilize my time here on the station and the opportunities I'm being given from my father, grow, learn, be better, and then go pursue. Oh my, what great stuff!
Well, and with all of that being true, they also still allow the character to still be young.
Yeah.
Like the mistakes he makes as a young writer are what a kid would do. Like you, when you're that young, you try to write like an adult as opposed to write in your own voice. And so like he's still a kid too, as well as having
and he doesn't have to say it, but we know that infused in this is, you know what, I had a great time. I want a little bit more time with my dad.
Yeah. No, it's really, really cool. That's when 3 Cardassian warships arrive in front of them. It's Gul Dukat, and he's there to congratulate them on making it all the way to Cardassian space. They did it, and the Tachyon Eddy must have taken them just like it did the ancient Bajorans. And Dukat has to read a proclamation from the Cardassian government, which is forced to admit that it's so funny. Just today, we discovered an ancient Bajoran ship crashed on Cardassia, and they shoot off fireworks to celebrate, which I can't imagine the Cardassians ever would have done. But it's a great way to end the episode.
Yeah, or they don't even have to really. Well, we'll talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, All right, so let's let us now go move along home. Go tea along home.
AlamarEmmys, count to 4. AlamarEmmys, then one more. AlamarEmmys, it's AlamarEmmys time!
I'm just sitting here watching the Wadi guy do that, and just realizing this is the same show as
It's true.
as Move Along Home. It's kind of hard to imagine that like it's both the same show. But let us discuss, were there any wormholes in the plot?
Minor, right? So one minor and then one just kind of like overall. So one, like you said, the fireworks thing, it's like, when have they ever done that, right? Like, when did they have ever need for a firework type of thing, or why would they celebrate this? And also, I guess I get the like propaganda reason why you would have to be like, oh, this crash site found and blah 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 blah. But they could have kept it under wraps, like, were they just waiting for a moment to. I understand the point it makes, but it doesn't logistically make a lot of sense why they would have to do it then. Whatever. The bigger one for me is, so you're telling me, in all of this time, Ben Sisko's the only person who has decided, the only intrepid hobbyist archaeologist who's like, let's go test this ship thing out? Nobody's ever done that before successfully?
Well, we don't know that anybody, if anybody has tried and failed, because I think it was a pretty unlikely thing. But remember, Bajor's been under occupation for like 70 years, 80 years. So we're not in a position to have given it a try. Like nobody, they're just trying to survive. They're not like tinkering and fooling around with this kind of stuff. They didn't have the luxury of doing that. And before there was a sort of a peace treaty going on with Cardassia and the Bajorans, and before there was the Federation there to sort of like play dad watching the whole thing. I mean, they might have tried, and the Cardassians might have blown them out of the sky.
Right.
And because they wouldn't have had a way to communicate back in time.
Okay.
Like,
Still.
Why wouldn't they?
But that's okay. And then the second thing I would say is, we could probably, I'm not going to, I'm sure someone probably already has, we could probably go and put together a loose timetable from when Ben is like, yo, let's build this thing, to when it's built, because of when Jake receives he's gonna go see this girl's gonna visit, and then he received the communique and stuff. Like, we could probably piece together a timetable, and I'm guessing it's gonna be very quickly that Ben single-handedly got all these supplies and built this huge elaborate ship. And that seems a little unlikely, even given Ben's proclivity to being pretty good. He didn't have any engineering help or any. It seems like it was like, it's different than a little model clock.
Well, he has the help of a future computer.
It still strains a little credulity. It doesn't bother me. I'm just saying it's on the list of wormholes, and we're willing to let it go. But those are my only couple quibbles. So, Keith, would you like to add anything to the mix?
Yeah, no, I don't think I have anything that you didn't say. I mean, the fireworks was a very out of character. But I liked it. It didn't matter to me because of what the rest of the theme of the episode was, and how important that was culturally. And the only way I can fill that wormhole is the political machinations with Cardassia and Bajor are very complex, and the Cardassians are always up to something. So they're always pretending to do one thing. Well, like this. I mean, how often does Dukat say, "I'm the good guy. I'm your friend. I'm your whatever"? And so there's a lot of sort of performative friendship things that he does for all sorts of various different reasons. And I could totally see the Cardassian government for lots of different reasons doing this as a ploy, as a feint, as a whatever. So they do act and do odd things all the time as some sort of manipulation or negotiation tactic. So I could totally see that as a diplomatic thing, and we see it in the Cold War between Russia and the States. Like, we'd have these sort of diplomatic flourishes of a state dinner and sending flowers or returning the whatever, and so, like, I think the diplomacy element of it, I could see them doing that. We just don't know what the underlying architecture of that is. So that's how I'll fix it.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's talk about our best moment.
Well, there's some really good ones. There's a lot of places where like I said, I thought they were going to go trite, but they don't. I actually think there's, man, any of those Cisco Ben scenes really could be, or Cisco Jake scenes could be. I think I'm gonna choose the story about, when Jake's on the hammock and Ben's talking about when he went to college.
Homesick. Yeah.
I think about the only time I saw my dad cry, really, was when my brother went to college and we dropped him off, and then we're getting ready in the car to drive home, and so that scene where Ben's, explaining his just talk about emotional maturity, realizing that Jake is going to fly the coop and he'll get over it just like I got over it, and it's all about moving forward, and it's such a life lesson he's teaching Jake. But at the same time, Jake is hearing that and saying, "I'm not ready. I want to."
Right.
There's so much happening just during like basically a parable. So that's the best moment I'm going to pick, because I think it sums up the relationship that this whole episode is in service of.
Well, and I think, I'm obviously gonna pick another Ben Jake moment here, and I think it's sort of the flip side of exactly that scene, because in the scene you're describing, he expresses his vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
He shows his vulnerability to Jake. He is able to empathize with him and say, like, I know how you might be feeling. I felt that too. I was sort of vulnerable, and here's sort of what happens. I'm going to say the flip side of that, and where he didn't show his vulnerability for also a good parenting reason, so that when Jake didn't want to go, he did not sort of guilt Jake into it by showing how heartbroken he was. And when Jake said, I do want to come, he didn't overreact to that either. It was a way, as a parent, you show vulnerability sometimes, but you don't show vulnerability as a way to manipulate your child. And you show vulnerability as a way to empathize, but not manipulate. And that is like really fantastic parenting. And so those two flip sides, I think, were the best moment for me. Really, really good. Let's throw out some stem bolts, shall we?
You get some stem bolts. Hell yeah, they are self-sealing. Here are some stem bolts for you.
This one hit hard. I loved so much of it. For all of the sci-fi goodness and giant scale things we saw last week and we've talked about, this week goes a completely different way. It's father-son on a boat talking, right?
Right.
And like we said, every time I thought it could fall into a trite, they could make a trite. I don't even mean trite in the pejorative way. It would go in a direction where you would think, okay, it's the Waltons, right? It's the Andy Griffith show, which has every right to do. It's a network television show.
Sure.
It goes a different way. Instead of the violins playing like on a Family Matters,
Right.
or a Cosby Show, which was like a kind of a prototype of that kind of a relationship, right? They were trying to show. Sorry to call that allusion to bear, but regardless, it's what it. In the culture, in pop culture, that's what that was trying to do, a very similar father figure. But here it highlighted emotional intelligence and maturity at every turn. On the flip, in the B story, and we talked for an hour about how much this was an important episode for them, and it leaves them both they each individually grew, their relationship grew, and they have a better understanding moving forward. I don't know why. I guess the joke on Jake has been how fast he grows. I thought people were talking about he was annoying as like a character. I think he's absolutely excellent. He's one of my favorite characters, I think. And just I'm so interested in like who continue to see him grow and become because he's becoming like an even better version of Ben Sisko, who I love. Okay, so on the B story. Once again, incredible relationship building in the sort of his new friend, right? The person he thought was going to be this enemy, this rivalry that he created was conjured. This person she didn't even know who he was. There can't be a rivalry if they don't even know you. And if he had just gotten over himself and gotten over the fear or the anxiety, the social anxiety, it's such kind of a meta commentary on social anxiety that we impose on ourselves. Success, just these monsters we create in our head. And if we don't ever face them or approach them, or at least open ourselves up to the catastrophizing we've done, we just live in it, right? We live in the stress we create, and we can just avoid it by going head in and being just honest and vulnerable and open.
Yeah.
And also that grows his friendship with O'Brien, who O'Brien is honest with him, and they drink, and he's like, look, I had to get to know you. And and this episode on every front is about emotional vulnerability and the growth that can be extruded from that. And it's just something you do not see at this time on TV very much, especially from mostly men.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Compare this to like Al Bundy, Right.
Emotionally vulnerable men are a big part of Deep Space Nine. And
I also love that Quark, it even in a comedic beat, don't underplay that Quark bet on Bashir.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're all starting to kind of root for each other and get each other's back, and there's so much. And even the conflict in this episode isn't real, like the ship, it's all just kind of there because we have to hit those beats, but it's not about any of that. This is really a meditation, this episode. This edit is really, and I'm here for it. I just thought it struck every emotional beat right for me. The pacing was just right. The performances that they got out of these actors was really great. I really can't poke almost any holes in it, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
I absolutely loved it. I'm not going to shoot the moon here, but I'm going to give it a solid. In our high school, our grading curve didn't hit A until 93, Keith. So I'm going to give it an A, and I'm going to give it 93 self-sealing stimples.
Yeah, I mean it's really interesting because I knew you were going to like this episode. For all of those reasons, and I do too. And it's an episode that I have liked more and more the older and more mature I've gotten. Right? So when I was 15, I was like, I don't know, whatever, like it's fine. But like now, it's like, oh man, that just hits in a really specific and interesting way. And I think that we have four. Basically four dudes in this episode. We have Ben and Jake, and we have O'Brien and Bashir. And it's about those twin sets of relationships. And what we find on Deep Space Nine, which I really like, is that these relationships are almost characters too. Because we talk about the station is a character on this show. Yes, but also the Ben-Jake relationship is its own character on the show. And the O'Brien-Bashir friendship is its own character. And so we're seeing those characters really develop in this episode a great deal. O'Brien being able to admit that he loves Bashir for the first time in this episode. And Ben and Jake's maturing and growing relationship as Jake grows up, as Ben goes through stuff. They're both maturing in different ways and taking care of each other in different ways. Just as we've seen O'Brien and Bashir grow and take care of each other. And it's really I think it's beautiful. And as you said, like the vulnerability of these male relationships is not something that we saw a lot, especially on television. And I think it's very smart and very well written. And it's a tremendously well written episode, and it's fascinating to see it on the heels of the Die Is Cast. And Star Trek does this beautifully sometimes on the heels of these gigantic arcs, these gigantic stories. We get these little palate cleanser character pieces. After the Best of Both Worlds on Next Generation, we had part 1, part 2. We the episode Family is almost a part 3 of that, and yet it is a deeply personal, emotional family story. That there's no sci-fi, there's no pew-pews. It's Picard wrestling with the emotional consequences of Best of Both Worlds and dealing with his family. That I think, you almost see these things in 3 pieces, and I really like this as our thing we go to after that crazy big episode, to have this beautiful father-son story in this, and we have one coming up next season that is jaw-dropping.
Oh, great.
So really, really fun. I love this. I love this episode. It's really great. So I'm going to give it 90 self-sealing stem bolts. Very emotionally satisfying.
I also think it's important to mention, since we're talking about the focus on male relationships and vulnerability, and I had started my sort of review with how many traps it doesn't fall into, and the one that we failed to mention thus far, and I think it's important for Bashir, is when there's the resolution with his classmate. Very easily could have made them flirt and it become about that, but they don't do that, right?
No, it's about the science.
About the science and the friendship,
They
and
wanna
they
talk
walk
medicine.
off. Yeah. Now maybe Quark misinterprets they're walking off together, but that's fine. That's what a Ferengi would do, actually.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
But I love that especially with Bashir, the way they set it up in the beginning, but the way they dovetail it, there is growth there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, no, for sure. And Bashir's growth throughout this series, how he, he went from how would he have reacted in that season 1 again? Yeah. So
Hurt my face.
Too old to do that.
But I think I think you mentioned it last week. I think our Ira Stephen Bear he's shepherding this now, and I think that he understands they had where they could go.
Yes. Well, and that's the thing. And I think that we talk about the growth and the emotional maturity of these characters. Well, that's what the show's doing. Mm-hmm. The show, again, pointing out, to go from Move Along Home and to have this be an episode just a couple of seasons in, the maturity and growth of the series. Mm-hmm. That we're starting to, we have our traction now. We're not spinning our wheels. We are fully moving forward. Really awesome, really exciting. So next week we have another very exciting debut. I can't wait to see how Mike is going to react to a character we like to call Moogie in the episode Family Business. Ooh, look out. Mike, if people were like, I want more of this shit show, how could they see it?
Well, Keith, I do think we tied it together at the end. We got our ish together. Although I noticed that Strange New Worlds is not on this slide.
No.
And that's the next show you'll see this week. Check it out on Friday, where we got something good for you, I'm sure, on the next episode. We also talk about cool stuff we've watched, and sometimes we get into a really nice conversation about creativity and how it shows itself in your life. You can check that out on K&M Geekly. Drops on Mondays. Look at my Star Trek toys. We dropped some exciting announcements. Exciting. And this week, yeah, sure. This weekend, we're doing something.
Big packages, which we don't know anything about, but you're going to this weekend. And you can follow our social medias and whatnots. Also, check out all the good stuff happening on Keith's Patreon. Keith's thing, because he's writing new musicals and all kinds of stuff. And you can check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/KNM. We appreciate you guys. Thanks for sticking with us. We know it's lots of it's just craziness, but we thank you for being part of the team. Yeah, indeed. All right, we will see you back here next week with Family Business. Till then, this has been Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. Thank you for watching K&M Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe. Or become one of our patrons at patreon.com/KNM.